I'm Bill Kanengiser, and good to see you guys here. And I'm in town to play a guitar recital tomorrow night, but I also was asked to do a little talk about essentially musicians' wellness. And just so you know, a little background on me. I'm also the chair of the wellness committee at USC, and it's something I'm really dedicated to and believe in. And I actually teach a little class, an intensive class, to cover everything from performance anxiety to hearing protection, vocal health, etc. And what I thought would be most, kind of helpful to focus on in this short amount of time would be how we as musicians can play with poise and not be so tense about it. And so that's the focus of today's talk. And I'd love to have time for anyone who has a question. If just please raise your hand, and we can be very informal about it. So the idea is, here's a guy who's kind of tense, and I think he's also got a problem. He's playing with the guitar upside down, so that's upset him. And obviously someone just stole his footstool, so he's mad. When I saw this picture up close, I was like, I didn't know that they had Air Jordans in 1860, but apparently, anyway. So this guy has, if you look at his body, he's got like a twist to his pelvis. He's holding his leg up. He's got tension in the side of his neck. And so awkward and unbalanced positions, in order to hold them, that incurs what's called static muscle tension. So static tension is when you hold something rigid as a stability and then move. Not necessarily bad for a short amount of time, but can be uncomfortable. Now this guy, he's gone a little too far. He's now completely contorted and doesn't look very happy. I think it's also the fact that his guitar doesn't have strings or frets. That's the thing that's really upset him. But static muscle tension held for many hours of repetition can make you stiff. It can cause chronic pain, and if left unchecked, can actually cause injury and keep you from playing your instrument and being a functional musician for the duration of your life. So the question then is, why do we hold tension when we do something that we love? And I think in some way boils down to the weight of worry. This guy is holding the weight of the world on his shoulders, right? And when we do something we care deeply about, like presenting ourselves for judgment in front of an audience, we can tend to impose a lot of worry on ourselves. And for some reason, that can cause excess tension. So it all boils down to this human response called the startle reflex. So the startle reflex, let's just say this gentleman here is standing there minding his own business, and you can see his posture is extremely balanced. He's very, he's relaxed. And there are these little things sticking out of him, to measure something. And without any warning, bang! They shoot off a fake gun. And in the blink of an eye, you can see what's changed in his body. And, one of the most obvious thing is his head is thrust forward, right? His shoulders are up and rigid. He's now making a fist. His stomach muscles are engaged. His butt is tight. His knees are locked. His jaw is clenched. You can't see his eyes, but his eyes have gone shut. Now, this isn't a bad thing. This is a natural protective instinct that we have to sudden threat. And it happens faster than conscious thought. This happens at the spinal cord level. And it's a great protective instinct. Okay. The problem is sometimes we hold a small version of this startle reflex at a baseline level when we're tense and emotionally worried about things. So here's some chronic startle patterns. It's a little hard to see this guy, but this guy's timid over here. Here's something broke. He's defensive. He's feeling upset, and then driving. And you can add to this playing whatever instrument you play. Like, how do you hold yourself when you're doing this thing that's important to you? And so the idea of the startle reflex is a good thing. The chronic holding of that tension, a small version of that, can be debilitating, and it can keep us from being open and free as musicians. So the idea is there's physical intensity. It doesn't always equal musical intensity. And, there's I think an instinct that when we want to do a big crescendo or do a very emotional thing, that we tend to emote with our, now I'm guilty of this myself. I sort of can't help when I play making facial expressions, but the thing is we want to be able to balance it. So what kind of physical intensity am I talking about? It's like trying to do something, or doing, the act of doing, or forcing my way through something, avoiding mistakes. Don't do that. And my problem, expressing with face and body. Now, what are the results of this kind of thing? Well, our muscles become kind of rigid. We have that static tension, holding static tension. That idea of bearing down. Physical imbalance, like perhaps we're leaning one way or the other, or contorted in some way. And gripping, and then ultimately, choking, messing up because it's not going well. Okay, so what's the opposite of this? Using the body in a comfortable, natural way. So that's like allowing things to happen. Expanding, not pulling in and protecting. Being balanced, not leaning to one side or the other. Feeling not just emotionally, but the tactile sense of the finger on the string, or the reed in the mouth, or the pedals in the piano. Like being able to feel, resonating. If you're a singer especially, or a wind player, even a guitar player, your body is part of the resonating, vibrating circuit. And if you're tight and tense, your body won't actually resonate. So what do we get from these? We get, it's easy to play. I'm open as a musician. I'm mentally more poised. I have a natural expressiveness, not a forced expressiveness. And my sound actually improves. My sound opens up, it becomes more resonant. And all of these things kind of fall into what I call, or what is called, flow. That's what we all want to achieve as a performer, is what Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi calls the flow state, where you just almost lose sense of time. You have no doubts about your ability, and the music flows through you, and you're transported. That's transcending the instrument. Okay, so what are the things that allow us to be natural? One is just understanding how our body is constructed, and that muscles are important, but the function of muscles in general are to move bones around. We have postural muscles that hold us in position, but quite a few of the muscles should only be used when you want to move something. And if you have structural alignment, you let gravity support you. You can see that this drawing represents that guy who is about to have the gunshot. Everything's perfectly aligned. The head is over the shoulders, which is over the hip joint, which is over the knees and the ankle joint. And so it's like stacking up a bunch of blocks, and with very little energy, this person can stay aligned. So what's the difference between what we call like good posture or different kinds of posture and a poised arrangement? So I'm sure, when you were growing up, your parents told you, sit up straight, have good posture, or stand up straight. Okay, that's good posture. Okay, good. Okay, that's what I call a raised rib cage. Okay, so this is an example of that, like someone who's sitting, my rib cage is up, or thrusting the chest out. Okay, so, but what are the negative sides of this? Well, first of all, if you do that, you notice that it tightens up the stomach muscles. It tightens your neck, right? Your shoulders can't really move that well. They're locked in back. And for sure, you get a lot of tension in the lower back, right? Because you're really curving that lumbar area at the bottom of your back. Okay. Now here's another one, the cool, compliant one, the slumped rib cage. So the slump, or the slouch, that's good. Yeah. Okay, so what does that do? Well, also restricts shoulder mobility, right? It makes the arms kind of floppy, right? Limits the upper chest breathing, right? Because you slump down, now my rib cage is sort of collapsed, and my rib cage really can't open up from here. And it tightens the throat and the tongue, right? When you're like, hey man, kind of like that. I don't know why I'm talking with that voice. Okay, and here's another one, the attentive, concerned one, neck craning. And I think for musicians, guitarists especially, this is the one that we fall into a lot. Anytime you have to look at your instrument or look at the music, right? It's our natural instinct it's like there's this powerful magnet that attracts our eyes and it pulls it, So you see a lot of guitar players and they're like, it's like there's this thing trying to pull their head off of the top of their body, right? So what are the negative effects of this? Well, jaw, throat, and shoulder strain, okay? Possible nerve compression, by thrusting the cervical vertebra forward, it puts a great deal of amount of strain on this area. The nerves emanating from here are the ones that innervate your arms, right? And, in extreme cases, people can get compressed discs, get nerve impingement, numbness, tingling, paralysis. Compromised breathing. So again, if I'm like this, it sort of locks the chest, right? And this is an Alexander concept with downward pull. It's basically it's a manifestation of that stress, that startle response, which is like that, but it's like a small version of it. I hope I don't screw up. That thing. Okay, and I bring a special attention to this forward bend of the neck with relating it to modern technology, which is insidious, and it actually has a syndrome that is noted by physical therapists, etc. It's called text neck, and it's the idea that people do this, and I'm sure all of you have seen. I see like elementary school kids, and they look like 70-year-old, 80-year-old people. They're like this. It's like their necks are just totally forward, because they're going. So this diagram shows the position and then the force to the cervical spine. So when it's neutral, your head exerts about 10 to 12 pounds of pressure on this area. At 15 degrees, 27, 45. At 60 degrees, 60 pounds. So if you're way down here, your head is 4 times heavier, and you have to use counterbalance and weight. Now, they have not been able to measure it at 90 degrees. But they actually did a study here where they did. It goes to 0, which is great. So if you go all the way, so anyway.
Your headphones on.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not a certified Alexander instructor at all, but I have a great deal of interest in it. And there's this side category of Alexander called body mapping. And for those of you who are interested, it was Barbara Conable and her Andover Educators series that really explore this idea. And the concept of body mapping is pretty simple. It's like there's this version that we have of ourselves in our mind that determines how we move. And the idea with body mapping is if your idea is not matched to reality, you will move the way your idea is, not the way reality is. And if you remap in your mind very clearly, you will change your movement. Okay, so the thing is, this is kind of how we see ourselves, as this mannequin doll. And I'm going to go over like certain important details of this to show you the difference between our map and our reality. So this is how we see ourselves, but this is how we really are. This is the actual structure of our bodies. So the first thing, quick, point. Where does your head connect to your spine? Quick, point. Show me. Come on, Chris. Where does your head connect to your spine? Okay. Almost everyone pointed right here.
Yeah.
Right there.
No, higher.
Maybe there?
Well, higher.
Higher?
Yeah.
There? Right there?
Like, but inside.
Okay, well, you're cheating.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay, the answer is right between the ears. Okay, so what I want you to do, I'll have to put the mic down. Take your fingers and go like this. Now imagine that your fingers actually touch in the middle of your head. And now go like this. And if you nod your head, notice your fingers don't move. Okay, that's where, now here, if we look at the skeleton, see, a lot of you pointed right here, right? Or maybe here, but it's most people point too low, and they certainly point at the back of the head. It's right there, right between your ears. That's where the top of your spine is. And someone drew this little red rocking chair, okay? And the idea is that actually the top of your cervical spine has this thing called the atlas. And it has these, like a cradle on it, and then the bottom of your skull, the occipital bone, rests on it, and it can rock like this. So when you do this, do it. And you do this gentle nod, what you're doing is moving your skull on the top of your spine. Okay. In order to do that, the muscles in the back of your neck have to be relaxed. If we tighten the muscles in the back of the neck and do this, which looks a lot like text neck now, doesn't it? Now I cannot deliberately do this bad thing and try to do that head nod thing. It's like almost impossible. You have to be upright, and you have to relax the muscles in the back of your neck to have free movement. Okay. And so this idea that the front of your skull is a little heavier than the back because it's got the jaw attached to it, and some people's brains are fatter than others. The idea that you can imagine the front of your head gently pulling your head down. Not enough to go like this, but just gently nodding down. And in order to do that, you have to relax these muscles in the back of your neck. And the the really wonderful thing about this is if you can find that balance, usually what I'll ask people to do is do this little chicken thing where you slightly push the chin back, and then you can imagine your head gently falling forward. It exerts this gentle pull on all the muscles in your back and aligns everything. And as soon as you go forward, it tightens up all these other muscles. So this is a starting point. It's like, where is your head? And for Alexander people, it all starts there. It's like, if this is messed up, everything else down the whole cascade, all the way to your toes, gets messed up. So this is like the fundamental thing. Quick, where's your hip joint? Where's your hip joint? Stand up, point, where's your hip joint? Cheating.
No, I just don't like that much.
No, you got it. Okay, so most people point to right here, which is the top of the pelvic arch. Okay, right? Because that's where we think of the hips. Okay, where is it? Probably more central and lower than you thought. So it's not here, it's here. And if you want to find out where it is, just move one leg up and down. And it's like, oh, there's the joint right there. Okay? Now, why is this important? Okay, I go back to my little doll thing here. We like to think of the waist, right? And, if I have to bend down, say, okay, bend at the waist. And we think of the waist as being, basically where my belt is. That's my waist, right? Well, the reality is there's no such thing anatomically as the waist. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. It's just a thing for fashion designers to make a difference between the top of your pants and the bottom of your shirt, okay? Because I realize that if I try to touch my toes and I bend from the waist, I'm actually trying to bend my spine right here. And I go, God,
Hurts just watching.
it hurts, right? But then I realize, well, wait a minute, if this is where I bend, right? If this is my hip joint, then I can do that. See? No problem, right? So just by changing my body map of where this bend, I have more mobility and ease of mobility. So it's just an example of it. Okay, but now that we're working our way down to the pelvis, this is, I think, a really cool way to think about the pelvis, whether we're walking, standing, or sitting. And the idea is, imagine that so your pelvis is the bottom of your spine, right? It's this, we'll have a picture of it in a second. See, that's the pelvis right there, okay? Imagine that it's a bucket of water right there. And if you tip the bucket forward, okay, you see how I'm going, then water spills out the front, okay? Or if I tip it back, water spills out the back, okay? Or if I tip it to the side, water spills out, right? So you want to keep it kind of central. Now, the thing is, when you have a bucket of water that's kind of full, it's okay for it to slosh around a little bit. You can't hold it completely rigid either. So it can move, right? But you find the center of it. I guess I'm doing a little salsa dance now, right? Okay, but this idea of being aware of freedom of movement and balance and not holding it in one position to one side or the other can be a great way to think of it. And you can see here, this guy's bucket is poured forward, and it doesn't just mess up his pelvis, but look what it does to his whole spine. Like, it increases the curve in all of them. It contorts his head forward. Or if he's forward like this, it throws his weight back. Or this is the good posture guy, thrusting it back. So it's involved. Now, so here's the pelvis from the front. And what I want to point out, so I assume most of you are either guitar players or some kind of instrumentalist that you have to sit down when you play. So we have to think about, not just how we hold ourselves when we stand, but how when we sit. And maybe I'll grab a chair. Grab one other little thing real quick. So at the bottom of the pelvis, there are these little bony extremities. They're actually called the ischial tuberosities. Okay, but we like to call them the sit bones or the rockers. And it's a wonderful design because they're kind of curved, and they're designed so that when you sit, you can rock back and forth on them. So when we sit down, those bones are accepting all of the weight of your entire torso, all the way up to your head, of your arms. All the weight, well, some of the weight might be delivered a little bit to your feet, but the majority of your body weight, gravity, is supporting that on those sit bones. Okay, so I like to call it the feet of your butt, right? So if you imagine you're sort of standing on them. Now, we're all friends now, so we can do this. I think it's important to actually just for a moment sit on your hands and just feel where that rocker is, and like kind of lean forward, lean back, lean to one side, lean to another side. Now you can remove your hands and feel like, okay, where was I delivering that weight? And you could, if you lean forward, you feel, oh, I rock forward on it. Now, let me see what my next slide is. Yeah, and so if we sit kind of incorrectly, let's say, here's that really good posture lady, right? With the super arched back. When you do this, notice I'm actually off of the sit bones, and some of my weight is being supported actually by my leg bone now, like that. Here, she's sitting way to the side, and all of her weight is on that sit bone. And sitting with a real slumped position, I mean, she's actually not nearly as slumped as I was hoping. I was like this kind of slump, or even this kind of slump. Right now, I mean, it feels kind of good because it's relaxed, but right now, I'm not sitting on the sit bones. Most of the weight is on the tailbone. It's on the coccyx, okay? So if you employ this idea of the bucket now, the water bucket, when you're sitting, you can see, okay, this is spilling water forward, right? Which puts me way in the front of those sit bones. This is spilling water back, and now I'm sitting off the sit bones, or sitting to the side, right? And then you can find, okay, if this bucket is aligned and balanced, where on my sit bones am I? And feeling like you have the potential for mobility, like you have balance. If, let's say you're a pianist, and you have to go, I don't play piano, but right? Like when I go this way, I'm shifting my weight to the left sit bone, and then I go back to the middle, and I go back like this. Or if I'm, feeling musical and I want to move, I can rock on these rockers. But notice when you do this kind of rocking maneuver, I'm not going like this, right? I'm keeping my alignment of my head and the alignment of the spine pretty much in its natural position. Sometimes the way I like to think of this is getting slightly off topic. Is I almost imagine a laser pointer coming right out of the top of my head, and it's pointing at the ceiling, right? And I kind of draw a little line on the ceiling, back and forth, like this. And then I draw a line side to side on the ceiling. And then I make a little circle, and go one way, go the other way. And then I find like the middle like the sort of the center. It's like, oh, that's the center. And the thing is, if I want, I can go forward. If I want, I can go back. If I want, I can go to the side. But there's the center. And when you do it that way, you're kind of guaranteeing that your spine is nicely aligned, your neck is neutral, and the weight of your whole torso is delivered onto the feet of your butts. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so where are we now? This is something that I use myself because it really helps me as a guitar player. And not all musicians have to do this, but I know a lot of musicians, a lot of wind players suggest using some kind of a wedge cushion. And that's because most chairs are designed for people to sit back on the chair and have the lower spine supported by the back of the chair, this is actually very ergonomic. But as a guitarist, I want to be here. I need to be farther forward. And the problem is most chairs, this one a little bit, but a lot of chairs slope back. So the thing is, when I'm sitting in this chair, I have to use a conscious amount of muscle to keep my bucket from spilling out the back. And what I find for myself is I end up tensing forward and holding tension in the lower back to keep it from rolling out. So you can, on Amazon, you can find tons and tons of these wedge cushions. This is one I fashioned myself out of a Savarez bag. And I just got like a little camping little cushion thing, and then I got a little piece of foam that I cut so that it's wider on one side and skinnier on the other. And so I just put it like that. And so when I sit on it, the back of my sit bones are kind of supported by this. And now if I'm neutral, I can relax my pelvis and it doesn't roll back. For me, it really helps. Now, I think a pianist couldn't use this because on an artist bench, but what pianists sometimes do is they put a little block of wood on the back legs of the piano bench, just to tilt it somewhat forward, just a little bit. So this can be a really good thing because I find for myself, if I don't have this, it really throws my alignment off. Okay.
What happens when you're short? Your feet don't reach the ground, which is what my problem is. All chairs are too high.
Well, then, I'm very particular about the height of my chair.
Because if I have
get a chair or get an artist bench that goes all the way down. You should have a 15-inch chair. And I like a 16-inch. Okay, so quick, where does your arm connect to the rest of your skeleton? Or where does your arm connect to your trunk? Quick, point to it. You're close.
Well, it's a sternum, but
Oh, very good. Wow. Okay, you've studied. Okay. So almost everybody's going to point here. Okay, because that doll, right? This is where our arm starts. Okay, and you could make the argument. Okay, this is where my arm starts. Okay, but I didn't ask that. Where does your arm connect to your trunk? And the surprise answer. Oh, raise your hand if you know. I know. It's the sternoclavicular joint. Okay, so find your clavicle, find your collarbone, and here in front, and work in, keep going, and then right about here, you feel the little bump. That's where your collarbone connects to your sternum. Now, raise your arm up, and actually put your hand on your collarbone, and just start moving your arm around, and notice that your collarbone moves when you move your arm. Okay? Now, of course, there's lots of musculature here that also holds your arm connected, right? Because especially the rotator cuff is a very open joint. Okay? But this is where your shoulder, your whole shoulder and arm is connected to the rest of your body. So what does that mean? It means that when you have to move your shoulder, you can feel the movement happening from here. I found for myself, just realizing just remapping this, kept me from subconsciously holding a lot of muscular tension here in the pecs and the latissimus dorsi, like, because I felt like this is where my arm moves. And so now I've got all this tension here to keep this from moving. And then when I realized, oh, it moves here. So let's say for guitar, when you have to shift and avoiding like the pecs and this area, really tightening up, okay? Just that little change of awareness can really change how you move. So this is our guide. So it's not an arm that's connected to a chest by a shoulder. See, that's like, here's my arm, here's my shoulder, here's my chest. They're separate things. No, it connects here. What's underneath is not the way it always looks from the outside. Okay, what about our elbow? So almost all musicians have to have their arms bent when they're playing, okay? This is one of the simplest joints on the body. It's just a simple hinge joint, okay? And we don't need to spend a lot of time in this, but you should know that in general, you should have your arm around 90 degrees if possible. If you're holding your arm much tighter, then it actually impinges on tendons and nerves here. And this is relaxed, but you can't have as much control this way. And the thing is, there's a kind of notch in this joint that when you're about at 90 degrees has a built-in stability. And so if you bend your arm this much and then push against it with the other hand, you can see, okay, it's not that strong. Now go to 90 degrees and notice it's much easier to hold position. Now go to 120 degrees and notice. So it's naturally strong at 90 degrees. So when you're with your instrument, you want to see, is there a way I can keep my elbows about at 90 degrees? Okay, now do the royal wave. Oh yeah, that's a lovely frock she has on today, isn't it? Okay, so what is this movement? This is forearm rotation, or we can call it pronation and supination. Okay. So many activities, including playing musical instruments, typing, requires us to turn the hand at some angle relative here. Okay. Now, a lot of people don't know that there are two bones in your forearm. There are two bones. Even if you do know that, I bet you may not understand exactly how it is arranged. That the radius is of the center of is the outside of a circle, and the ulna is the pivot point. Now, this diagram shows it a lot better. If you imagine connecting to the elbow, there's this bone. Connected to that is this other bone that can rotate around it, and that's what your hand's connected to. So what you can do, this is a little tricky, but what I do is with my pinky, I go to my elbow, and then with my thumb, you feel the bone here, and I just follow that bone all the way up, and there's like this little bump at the bottom of my wrist. Okay, that's your ulna. Okay, now move your hand around and notice that this is not moving, right? The ulna is stationary and your radius is rotating around it. Okay? Let me see what, okay, not wrist. Okay, so let's say you're a guitar player and you have to you bend your elbow. Well, I can't play guitar like this, my hand's gotta be like this, right? Okay, so there's two ways to get your hand from pronation to supination. One is to pull the pinky side up. Okay, so actually, I think maybe the best way to do this is just bend your elbow and your thumb is like your thumb side is kind of pointing towards the ceiling, like this. And imagine that you're going to pull the pinky side up. Okay, and feel how tight you are in the forearm when you do that. Okay, now go back to neutral. And now what I want you to do is allow your thumb to fall out. And that's different, isn't it, than pulling your pinky up. Allow your thumb to fall out. So by doing this, you're following the natural body map of your radius rotating around the ulna. When you're pulling the pinky up, you're actually trying to pull the ulna up, and without realizing it, engaging all kinds of other muscles. And so, I don't have my guitar with me today, but imagine, no, it's fine. Imagine that I have to play on the 7th fret, okay, right? No, imagine I have to play on the 5th fret. So what we would do is, I bring my hand up to the 5th fret and I pull my pinky up. But what you could do is go to the 7th fret and fall out, and then bend your elbow a little bit to bring it up. So it falls out. Okay. Now, if you're a pianist, same thing. Like, instead of bringing your pinkies up to play, allow your thumbs to go forward and then just spread your arms like that. Same thing if you're typing, right? Like when you go to type, instead of going, allow your thumbs to fall and then spread your hands apart. Now, we're getting there. The wrist. What is the wrist? And where is the wrist? So where's your wrist? And what is it? What is it? So most people point to right here, like where their watch is, where that bump is. Well, the answer is the wrist is a very complex arrangement of bones. There's 8 carpal bones, and it's actually quite a bit higher and extends way into your hand. The bottom of your metacarpals, or the bottom of your fingers, are right about here, and the whole wrist arrangement is all in here. Okay, now, why do we need to know that? The thing is, if you map your wrist as a single hinge that goes here, and you bend it like this, you will have stiff movement and tight movement. If, however, you realize that there's a joint between the bottom of the radius, we already know what the radius is, and these bones, and there's a joint between the top of the carpal bones and your fingers, and then there's this kind of mid-joint. There's actually 3 different joints, here, here, and here. So when you bend like this, imagine it's like an accordion going, poof, and then when you bend the other way, it goes, poof. You have 3 joints that can open up. And now when you move, you see you can have this range of motion and ease of movement, as opposed to the hinge joint. Also, the wrist is capable of moving side to side. It's extremely adjustable joint arrangement. So you can move side to side. And what we want to do when we're playing is we have to balance wrist stability with flexibility, right? And we want to avoid extremes. If your wrists are really tight, which is what we need when we, have a bat or we're trying to defend ourselves, that's when we go into power grip, and all the muscles and tendons around the wrist bones join them as a unit that connects the whole arm as a unit. And then we have precision grip, where it loosens up and we can have flexibility. You need to have not too tight when we're playing and not too loose, so we have no stability. It's that poise and balance. We also want to avoid extremes of position. So bending the wrist to the side, to the pinky side, which is called ulnar deviation, right? Or bending it too much to the thumb side, radial deviation. Too much extension. This really puts extreme pressure on the tendons, and also this is to be avoided. So you want to have your wrists in neutral and as relaxed as possible to avoid injury. this relates to the general finger, the hand tension. So what I like to think of with any instrumentalist, imagine cradling a soft tennis ball, or actually the thing that works really well is imagine a very ripe avocado, actually, in your hand. And you don't want to make guacamole, it's just cradling. So you imagine cradling that in your hand, and your palm is soft. And the tip joints of your fingers are relaxed, not like that. And then you can have relaxed, independent finger motions. Right? Now, if you tighten up the wrist, what happens automatically to me when I tighten up my wrist, my palm gets hard, my tip joints tense, and I can't move independently. So that's what I like to think of. So these are extremes to avoid, like with various different instruments, various different places. So if the wrist is displaced, if it's either too bent or too extended or too much to the side, we should avoid it. Avoid overbending or over straightening fingers, like either really tight or really straight. Those are extremes. So here's a flute player with a really bent back wrist, or a pianist dropping here. Some people have very loose joints in their thumbs, so the thumb can bend back. It's good to avoid that. This is the classic guitar position, right? With the bent wrist. I never know how, the heavy metal guy, because he wants to look cool. It's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, how do they do that? Here's a pianist with very limber tip joints where they're collapsing. Not so good. And this is the ultimate guitar right hand technique right there. Isn't that perfect? Ulnar deviation, flat hand, tension for, not good. Yeah, there you go. Now, are there any wind players or singers here? Okay, so I didn't want to, completely just talk about guitarists and pianists. So taking some of these ideas about poise and body mapping to this, you want to try to have the minimum amount of tension in your shoulder, in your neck, in your jaw, and your tongue. So if your baseline of approaching the instrument is that, if you bring your head to the instrument, what's your instrument? Oh, sax. Yeah. So if you bring your head to the instrument before you even play a note, you're already got tension, and you're probably locking your jaw. This is kind of an Alexander idea, but I'm not a wind player, so I don't know. But this idea, I think, is kind of interesting, that when you need to open your mouth, that instead of raising your head, a lot of people go like, right? Or feeling like your jaw just drops. If you kind of imagine that your lower jaw gently falls forward and then swings out. So I go, like it just slightly goes forward and then it just opens. And I think that keeps you from forcing it down. The inside of your mouth, so that the soft palate, kind of like the palm of the pianist and the guitarist, soft, not held rigid, right? And then this idea that your larynx is floating off the bottom of your skull, which actually is how it is in reality. That the larynx is suspended off the bottom of there are these little tiny pin-like extrusions at the bottom of your skull, and that your larynx is floating off of that, and it's very different feeling than you're pushing the larynx up. Okay, and then what about breathing? Some of us have to breathe. You're a professional breather, right? No, absolutely. If you're a singer or wind player, you're a professional breather. So you spend a lot of time thinking about breath. But we all need to understand, like, what are the mechanics of breath? And I've already shown you how sometimes a different kind of posture can affect our breathing. Anytime we have a locked abdomen, it's going to affect our breathing, or if we have a collapsed chest. Well, here's why. The ribs are arranged in such a way that it's in Alexander, they describe it as the handles of a bucket. So it's like when you breathe in, they expand out and around like this. And then when you breathe out, they fall back down. And then there's this incredible muscle at the bottom called the diaphragm. It's actually much higher than most people think it is. Most people think it's down here. It's actually way up here. But it's like an upside down umbrella. And when you well, no, a right side up umbrella. But when you breathe in, it contracts and it goes and it flattens out. So when you breathe in, your diaphragm falls and your ribs open up. And what that does is creates a bellows effect. It opens up the lungs, which don't do anything. They just expand and draw air in. And when you breathe out, you allow your rib cage, your ribs to fall, and your diaphragm relaxes and it goes back to this shape, and that compresses the area. So let's do a couple of relaxed breaths. So breathe out, and when you breathe in, feel your ribs opening up, not just in the front and the sides, even in the back. And when you feel like exhaling, feel like they fall. And if you're sitting wrong, let's say you're sitting like this, notice now when I breathe in, my ribs can't move up, right? And some people have, especially when they're nervous, do this kind of breathing, where they actually arch the back because it looks like they're breathing more, because it looks like, oh, I'm moving my chest. It actually doesn't do anything for your breath. Okay. That's what I wanted to tell you guys, to see if we can get balance, poise, and ease from playing. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Do you have a way of deciding kind of what height your chair is? You said 60 inches is about, how do you measure it from the floor?
I go by feel. I mean, at one point I measured, what most, occupational therapists would recommend is when you're sitting, that your knees should be slightly lower than your pelvis. Like your legs should be slightly going downhill. If it's short enough that your legs are going uphill like that, that's not so good. You should be able to sit on your sit bones and not on the bottom of your leg bones. I know for myself, like if the chair's too high, it really throws me off. Now I didn't bring my whole gear, but I have this guitar support that I use. I have this small footstool that I made that's just the right height for me. With guitar playing, it's a nightmare, because a lot of guitar players use the standard footstool, which for some people works great, but for a lot of people it just throws off everything. If you imagine like being like this, and so you can see my pelvis already is going up like that. All my weight is on this sit bone, and imagine your pelvis goes like this, so your spine's going that way, and then the guitarist wants to bring their head towards the guitar, and so they're turning the spine like that, right? And craning this forward, and they sit like that for hours without ever taking a break, and then they wonder why their back hurts when they're done, So, for me, having a slightly lower chair is a little better than having too high.
Do you ever find the sensation of the guitar support is sliding off your leg at all?
Yes, and that's why I changed guitar supports, and I have one that I feel very confident
What do
with.
you use now?
I actually have both kinds with me for this. I was using the Barnett, or now it's called something else. But the one I have now is called Woodside, and I think it's really great. Yes, and I've had that experience too. Sometimes, I practice at home with normal pants, and then when I put my concert pants on, they're more slick, and it's like, wow. And then you end up like gripping,
Trying to hold.
yeah, and then all of, then forget it. All bets are off. Other questions? Yeah,
If you're playing guitar and singing,
yeah.
and have you learned that there's a preference in terms of standing or being seated? Standing, and a guitar strap, and that creates its own tension around the neck. Seated, I don't feel like I've got the energy. Singing.
I'm actually getting paid not to sing, so yeah. Yeah, I think certainly there's something about standing and singing that's really good for and to be able to move around. I think sitting, with a guitar for some people really constricts the vocal apparatus and the breathing control. Straps aren't necessarily bad, but there's some new straps that are more of like a backpack, kind of an X pattern, that a lot of people find a lot more comfortable than just the standard one that just pulls the neck down. It's sort of so that your back is supporting it, not your neck. So you might look into those.
And it's still the idea of having that 90-degree angle once you've got the strap.
Right.
And
And-
90 degrees would be all.
Yeah, and then the other thing, like I haven't really played with a strap very much, but I know that for me the problem with a strap is it makes the guitar too parallel to your stomach, whereas when I sit, the guitar is kind of leaning this way. So some people, there's like a little pad that you put under the bottom of the guitar, so it's
Cheap, I like it.
yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, it's just like a little pad, and so the guitar is up like that a little bit, and so then also, you don't have to come around the guitar like this. It's sort of leaning back, just so yeah.
Do you add any stretches to your routines?
I didn't have time to
It's
go.
another topic, but yeah.
It's another topic. Yeah, I have a lot of different stretches. Like opening up the shoulder here. Opening up the pecs, side to side neck things. I do a lot of, like sort of myofascial manipulation in the, here and here. There's a bunch of things you can do, even, quad stretches and things like that all really help.
Do you do it after you play or before?
What I tend to do, I tend to like try to feel like, what do I feel like I need right now? But I usually do this myofascial stuff, with my hands before I play to kind of lubricate everything, and then after I play, like I'll see where am I tight, and stretch after. Yeah. The thing is, you as a general rule, you don't want to stretch when your muscles are cold. You want to stretch when they're warm. So if you do stretch, warm up first, even just running in place, walking in place and dancing around for 2 minutes, but if you stretch cold muscles, it's not really good. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
What about for aging, as you age, as you get older, what, any additional, tips or
Yeah.
your own little, things that
Things change. I like to to point to my teacher and guitar guru, Pepe Romero, who's, pushed, he's almost, he's getting up there. He's, close to 80. He's like 78, I think. He's playing at the highest level, and he's lived by these principles without ever having studied physiology or Alexander technique or anything. He just knows it intuitively. So developing really good habits early on and avoiding these sort of subconscious imbalances and tensions, like they build cumulatively over time. That's maybe the best thing. That being said, there are certain things that change when one gets older. You know, people can get arthritis. People can get more rigidity in their ligaments. They can get nerve issues, neuropathy, and you know, all kinds of different things. Knock on wood. So far, I haven't had to deal with too many of them. But there's plenty of examples of people who've been able to play at their highest level, like well into their, you know, later years. You know, I'm thinking of like Horowitz or someone, you know, amazing, you know. Even Segovia kept it going there for a while, you know.
Williams.
Right? Williams, yeah, look at Williams. I mean, it's amazing. He's 80 years old and just playing beautifully. I mean, but he was always so gifted and so, but Williams is a great example of someone who, he's like the epitome of efficiency of movement. You know,
And
just,
good posture. Yeah.
natural good posture. And, you know, what frustrates me sometimes is you see people who break all of these rules
I still play well.
and they play great their whole lives. And then there's other people who look so relaxed and so balanced and they're all screwed up, you know, and so part of it is just like, you know, actually part of it is not just, oh, it's luck or it's, you know, like personal, like, you know, genetics, right? But a lot of it is that the way it looks from the outside isn't what's going on inside. Like sometimes the people who look like they're just totally tense are actually inside are actually very, very, not relaxed, but very well synchronized. And sometimes people who look really relaxed are actually holding a lot of tightness, you know. And so that's the thing that's so tricky, you know. But that's why I think that this idea of body mapping is an important technique, because it forces you to understand what's going on under the hood, and not just the way it looks. Anything else? Well, tomorrow night I'm gonna have to like.
We'll be watching.
Oh, I know. It's like, hey, wait a minute. Well, do as I say, not as I do. I know. Yeah. But thank you very much, everyone.